So, my name is Don Lesmeister, and this is my wife of 57 years, Joan, who's doing the recording. We live about 20 miles from Sacramento in Carmichael, California. And what I want to present to you today is a new technique or a different technique in regard to variegating camellias. In the past, most of the variegation was done through grafting, and you would graft a solid red, for example, on a variegated understock to get your variegation. And this would take in California 3 to 4 years before you get a flower. And us old guys can't hardly wait that long. So I came up with this idea of, I call it tying in, which is close to an approach graft. And I shouldn't do it, but I want to show you the results to begin with to keep your attention. Here's one of Lucky Star variegated that we did. Here's one of Elaine's Betty red variegated we did, and this one Best to Show in Peninsula 2 years ago. I tied it in about 2 years before I showed the flower. Here's one which is sort of my favorite. It's Elaine's Betty red variegated again on a different plant. And it won Best to Show in the Northern Society 2 years ago. This one here is Red Devil variegated, and I don't know why, but the photo isn't working out too well. But here's another one. This is one of my first tie-ins, and this was done several years ago. And here's one that we did 2 years ago on a Julius Nuccio. It's sort of a funny story, which I'll show you later. I painted some white out onto a Julius Nuccio and sent the picture to Tom and Jim Nuccio, and they thought it was tremendous until they found out what it was. You know, it's like anything else. This is not perfect. And there are some things that didn't turn out real well for me. For example, Elizabeth Weaver. For some reason, I couldn't get it to variegate. It looked terrible. I had to discard the plant. There's another one that I did of Red Devil variegated, and it's probably this one here. And it started going downhill. As you'll see, it's not a pretty plant, but I cut the tie-in off of it right here and right here, as you can see. And I'm trying to get the plant to recover. You can see it's got a couple buds on it, so we'll see what it looks like this year. Another one that's been a disappointment is Black Magic. For some reason, there's just enough virus in it to make it ugly. Doesn't enhance it one bit. I have another that I'm doing right now on Night Rider. Night Rider doesn't seem to be a very good grower here. I hope you can see this, but it has a couple of buds on it, and it had one flower, but there wasn't any indication anywhere in it of any white. And what I've done here is I have a Tudor Baby variegated, and I have one Night Rider on each side of it. You can see right now there isn't any white showing on it. You could probably cut it now if you wanted to. In here on Night Rider, is one here and one here on this plant, and then one here I guess it's the only one on this plant. Unless you can see another one. But anyway, that's where the tie-in is. And that's okay. And now for the technique. Joan asked me how I came up with this, if I read it somewhere. I have to say that I can't remember last Tuesday, and I sure don't remember how this was done. I did it years ago. The first time it was with Royal Velvet, so you know how far ago that was. But regardless of that, it's a good technique, and it saves a lot of time. Now, when do I do that? I try to do it right before the plants start to take off growing, which would be, in California, would be from now to the end of March. So it's a prime time now for us. And in fact, I've done all but one that I had planned to do, and I only did about 3 this year, and a couple was for one of the nurseries. You could do it any time, I guess. You'd probably do it in the summer, but if they're not growing, you're not going to get the virus into it. So the point is, try to get it when it's dormant or just starts to grow. I like Little Slam Variegated, the best one I like to tie onto the plants. However, it is a tall grower, and it outgrows a containered plant, and most of my plants are in containers. I think it would be a perfect one for down south where there are a lot of plants in the ground, because it would grow amongst the plant, and it's not a bushy plant. I think it would work out really well down there, but I like it here. It's worked out well. And the thing is that when I first started, it was based on availability and cost. And so Adolph Ottoson Variegated was probably the first one that I used, and I still use it today. I like a real good one is Royal Velvet Variegated. That's an excellent one. Nuccia's Bellarosa Variegated is another good one. And now they tell me that Hewlett Smith was using Tudor Baby Variegated, so I have several of those. And I've been trying that. I can't tell you what it's good. Joan says what? What are you saying? Tudor Baby Variegated.
Who is doing it?
Hewlett Smith, before he passed away. At any rate, so I got several of those plants from Nuccia's, and I'm trying them. I can't give you a plus or a minus on it, but I will give a report next year. But it's a nice bushy plant. You can use it on almost any variety you want. Hybrids are very easy to variegate, like this Lucky Star Variegated. I mean, this thing hit the first year, it was like that. And since then, it's getting better and better. Japonicas are pretty easy to do. The retics are very difficult. The more Japonica the retic has in its parentage, the easier it is. But the more retic it has, the more difficult. I like to use plants that have been in 2 gallons for a couple of years, or the small 5-gallon containered ones. The reason is I don't want to move them from one container to another after maybe 4 or 5 years at most. I like to paint the flower first. If I think I want to try a flower, I'll paint it. And this, I've done it here. I use whiteout, or my wife is a tool painter, and I steal her tool paints and use it. This isn't a very good paint job, but it gives you the idea of the contrast between the flower and what the variegation will do. And there are a lot of them you look at them and you'd say, well, this won't work, but it does. And there are a lot of them you say, this will work, but it doesn't. So this saves you the time of grafting it and then waiting for it to bloom, or to tie it in and wait for it to bloom. when I get the plants, excuse me a minute. When I get the plants, I would prefer to move it into a larger container myself so I could put it not straight up and down in the middle of the container but off to the side, because that makes it so much easier to tie onto it. This one here is a Elaine's Betty Red, and although I have that Elaine's Betty Red variegated, I'm going to do this for somebody else and give it to them. And this here is Shiboriago. Now, I haven't used Shiboriago in years, and one of the reasons why is the caliper is so small on it. It's a little bit more difficult to do a good job. But if you notice, both plants are leaning. They're not in the center, and this way I can tie them together very, very easily. I don't use this green tape any longer, because if you leave that on for a couple of 3 years, it grows into the plant, and then you have a devil of a time getting it out. So when I do, I make sure that they'll tie in. I locate an area where they will tie in, and then the first thing I do is to get my ducking tape and tie the containers together so they don't wiggle, wobble, or wiggle or woogle or whatever they do and come loose, because they'll tear right out if you don't have the containers tied together. I'm going to do this very sloppily because the way I normally do it, it takes so long that you guys would go to sleep waiting for what's going to happen, and that's why I showed the results in the beginning. But you get the idea of what I'm doing here. What I'm trying to do. And I usually make maybe 2 or 3 winds on here so that if I move the plants in the containers, they don't come loose. Okay. Then the next thing I do is I figure where I'm going to do this, and I take some electrician's tape and tie the plants together so they don't separate, and then I have a deuce of a time tying them together later. I might take this off before the day's out, but it's just a temporary gauge. Okay, so they're sort of held in place. Now the critical thing here is to scrape down to the cambium layer. And you have to do that on both sides so they match up. Now this is a long process for an old goat like me, but I'm going to try to do it real quick. You see how it fits pretty good, pretty well, pretty good. And what I'm going to do is just score it down to the cambium layer. On both sides. It's a good thing this is a Sasanqua. They're real pliable. They're easy to deal with. I don't put any growing powder or anything on it, but that's me. I don't want any comment about how sloppy that is, gang, because I'm sort of hurrying up here. Like I say, usually it takes quite a while for me to do it. Would you pull that stick out?
Oops.
So even if I do a sloppy job, you still get an idea of what to do. And you do it not in great haste like this, but you do it. Normally it would take me almost a half hour to tie this one in. And I tie it really super tight. And if a leaf gets in the way, I usually pull it off. And then I cover it with, get the ducting tape. Ducting tape.
I have to run and get it.
My wife has to run and get, see,
Rolled.
She's part of the team. Okay, so then I get my ducting tape and cover that electrician's tape up. And the reason for that is the ducting tape lasts a long, long time. They don't see this. I cut my finger off. I can just see Richard Buellin right now laughing, but that is it. Now, I'm going to tell you the secret to this whole thing, and it's far more important than what I've done so far, and that is I do it again up here. Now, don't you tell your friends, because they're your competitors, and if they do it this way, they won't have as much virus as if they do it twice. It loops through. And I'm not going to do it, but you get an idea of what where we are. Same process. Scrape it, match them up, put the electrician's tape on it, and then you put the ducting tape on it. And they, again, don't tell anybody about this second loop. And then the last thing you do is give it the papal blessing. And it'll work. The question is, when do you take it off? When do you leave it? Well, really, that's up to you. I have some that I've had on for quite a few years, 5, 6, 7 years. But when they're in 2 gallon and small 5 gallons, you can move them up together and put these in 5s in 3 or 4 years, something like that. And then after that, then you're pretty well on your own. But I think I pretty well covered it. Are there any questions, anyone? No questions? Okay, I did a good job then. Thank you.